Thank you, John. Boy, it's great to be back with you. Thank you for all the folks here, the volunteers, and John and the team that have put this together. It's really great. So I'm supposed to talk about home-based abundance. You know, I do a lot of media interviews and things like that, and people are always saying, you know, oh, this is all sweet, but can this really feed the world? And can we really eat this way? Well, in the U.S., we have 35 million acres of lawn. 35 million acres of lawn. You ready for the next one? And 36 million acres housing and feeding recreational horses. Now, not work horses, but recreational horses. Now, I'm not opposed to horses, okay? But that's 71 million acres. That's enough to feed the entire country without a single farm. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? So, too often we think about, you know, food abundance in industrial and commercial terms. You know, you look at the National Geographic and you see the pictures of the staggered combines through the Kansas fields, and you fly over, Nebraska and Kansas and the big center pivot irrigations and all that stuff. And the truth is that what we can do around our houses, yards, and small acreages can create true abundance and independence. So this is gonna be really nuts and bolts here. So let's hustle right through it. What to produce? What do we produce? Well, what do you like to eat? There's no reason to produce something you don't like. If you don't like eggplant, don't grow eggplant. There's a lot of reasons not to grow eggplant, but that's a good one. So think about what you don't like to eat, or what you do like to eat, all right? What you do like to eat, and do that. Next, what do you spend the most money on? You know, look at your grocery bill. Sarah just had a wonderful, I don't need to repeat what she said, but look at your grocery bill. Where does your money go? And look at that. What fits your climate? You know, if you're living here in Ohio, there's no reason to think about growing coffee and bananas. But what fits your climate? And imagine, you can make a list of all the things that can grow here. And there are a lot of things that can grow here. You don't have to grow potatoes in Idaho. You don't have to grow, cherries in Michigan. Those things maybe are not quite as easy to grow here as they do other places. But you can certainly grow things. We can extend growth to a lot of things that you don't normally see. And then what fits with your interest, time, and lifestyle, okay? Plants don't move. Well, I mean, they grow, but they don't run away. So think about what you can and can't do, and don't get over your headlights. We've heard presentations here over the last couple of days about, calling up and getting that cute cow before you have a corral. Is she trained to electric fence? Well, kind of. Yeah, she'll get trained when the state police and SWAT team and the interstate get shut down from that cute little cow that you petted on the nose at the guy's place and bought her, and you let her out of the trailer at your place and she turned into a, gazelle. So I'll encourage folks to start, and of course I'm a livestock guy, you know that, I love livestock, but start with something that doesn't move around and that doesn't require daily care. Because a lot of times we come to this, with our lifestyle, you're working somewhere, and so think about that. Seasonality, leverage your seasonality. Start small. Start small so you can build confidence. Don't start with, I know a guy, he read a thing about how much money he could make with pick your own strawberries. He'd never grown a strawberry plant in his life, and he bought strawberries and planted 5 acres of strawberries. He never had one customer. All he had was thistles. No. Start with, 6 or 8 strawberry plants. Build your confidence. Minimize your catastrophes. all right? So that's kind of the way I think about what you want to produce. Next, design for production. All right, I'm a big believer in the permaculture zones. If you've studied permaculture at all, you know they have zones. You have your closed zone around the house, then your next zone 2, zone 3, zone 4. And what they basically do is start at your doorstep, and Justin talks about this. Start at your doorstep and go out from your doorstep. So your herbs, your herb garden, you want that right by your doorstep. That's what you're going to reach out, and you're going to get that for dinner. So the things that you're going to visit every day, put those real close. The stuff you're going to visit, not every day, go a little farther. And so you kind of have your zones all the way back to the back 40. So once you decide kind of what needs a lot of attention and put that close, and what needs less attention, put that farther away, then you've got to be able to get there. That's called access. That's going to be everything from footpaths to vehicular all-weather lanes. So, for example, one of the things that we've done this year, we're kind of revamping our personal garden, Teresa and I, there at the house. We're getting older, so we're making tall raised beds because I don't want to stoop over as much anymore. And so we're making them wide enough so that we can get a front-end loader in there because we're using hugelkultur with compost and soil on top. And thinking long-term, so we're making them wide enough we can come in with a front-end loader and a tractor. Instead of making the beds perpendicular to the center lane, we're tilting them because there's not enough room to turn a front-end loader and dump. If you have a center lane and the beds are perpendicular, you can't dump a front-end loader in there because you can't wiggle the tractor in between the beds, right? But if you tilt them, so all you got to do is just turn the tractor just a smidgen, you can dump a front-end loader in those beds. So our beds are going to be, on a diagonal and winged. So think about access. How do you get there? A lot of times it's a lot better to have a little extra access ground so that you can get to things efficiently, quickly, easily, and with some of your equipment than it is to try to compress everything real tight and then have everything by hand. And there's room for both, okay? I mean, if you've got a postage stamp backyard, you're not going to have a tractor, okay? And so I get that. So footpaths to vehicular all-weather lanes, you want to be able to get there all the time. Think about drainage on your access. How are you going to get the water off? Enjoy meandering accesses, all right? Generally, an access needs to touch as much of your land as possible. So you don't want straight lines. You want meandering so that you can touch all of your peninsulas and your terrain, which brings us to the other point is work with your terrain. Don't work against your terrain. Generally, when you're putting in access, you want to bring it off ridge line and above valley line so you can get water drainage. And that works whether you have a small homestead or whether you have, 1,000 acres. Work with the terrain, meander it so that you touch as much ground as you possibly can. You'll never regret having good access, never. Next is to think about water, okay? Number one rule about water, you can't haul it. Water's heavy. It's time consuming if you're filling up things. You always forget, oh, shoot, I need to shut off the water. You go out there and you just, about a swamp. So you can't haul water. Pipe, bless modern times, is not expensive. You can get a pipe and you can pump water. You can gravity flow water. Remember, 1/3 of all water that comes in rain, 1/3 of it runs off as surface runoff. That means if you're in a 30-inch rainfall area, that's 10 inches a year runs off. 1 acre inch of water is 30,000 gallons. So in an area that gets 30 inches of rainfall, which this gets over that, but I'm using 30 because it's 1/3 is easy to divide into 30, okay? 10 inches times 30,000 gallons per acre inch is 300,000 gallons per acre per year. You don't need a lot of land to put in a pond. Remember, you can use gravity. 0.432 pounds per vertical foot gives you your pressure. You can change your flow, by increasing a pipe. So if you don't have that much pressure, you can increase your flow by increasing your pipe diameter at the same pounds of pressure. What if you don't have much elevation? Well, you can pull a tote up in a tree, an IBC tote, and you can have a little bicycle pump there that you pump the water up there, and then it can flow out. There's a lot of ways to use gravity. There's a lot of energy used in latent energy in keeping the coiled spring of a pressure tank running. That's why towns and villages use water tanks, water towers, so that you can get a lot of flow. So you can dribble it in throughout the day, and then you can flow it a lot when the herd comes up to drink, or you need to use a flush. So inventory can be stored in ponds. Cisterns, think about this, every inch of rainfall generates 2/3 of a gallon per square foot of roof. One more time. Every inch of rainfall generates 2/3 of a gallon per inch of roof. So again, you can do your math. I don't have time to do the math for you, but you can take that, do your math, look at your roofs on your homestead. A lot of times you have your home, you have your little storage building, you have a little livestock barn. You kind of have this, in the legal term, is curtilage. Your curtilage is your house and the adjacent kind of outbuildings. You can easily on even a small homestead accumulate 10 to 12,000 square feet of roof, and that'll generate 30 or 40,000 gallons of water per year, which you can put in a cistern. You can have just take a backhoe and dig a hole and put a liner in it. You can make a ferrous cement. You can pump that water up to a turkey nest pond to get elevation. There's all sorts of ways to do it. The last resort is a well, in my opinion. I like these other things because they generate additional water and they don't suck from the commons. Most libertarians like me don't talk about the commons, but it's an important thing to talk about. If everybody sticks a straw in the aquifer and starts sucking, pretty soon there's no aquifer. If everybody starts sticking a straw in the creek, then there's no creek. So I think part of our stewardship responsibility is to take the commons and, as a result of our life legacy, leave more water, leave more air, leave more soil, than was there when we came. Next is control. Okay, so we've got access, we've got water, and control. That's kind of my three-legged stool for production. Control. Control is fencing, of course. So what are we going to think about fencing? We'll start with givens. So if you have a lane, if you have an access lane that you're working with, that should be at least 16 feet wide. And so that's a given. You want to put a fence down both sides. That's the way you can get livestock from the barn to the fields to the corral to a loading area to whatever you want to do. Lanes are your arteries. That's your access for equipment, for animals, for tours, for you to walk on foot to whatever. And then another given is going to be a riparian area. If you've got a creek, fence it out. If you've got a pond, fence it out. Steep ground. Our rule of thumb is if it's so steep you don't feel comfortable driving on it, it ought to either be in a woods or orchard or vineyard or something. It shouldn't be in pasture because you're not going to get on it with equipment. Forestal areas to protect forests so you don't graze the woods and graze down all the regrowth that's coming on. Your yard, your garden, that's also a given, okay? And then certainly a given is the corral. So when we start thinking about where to put fences, we do the we do the givens, and then you work with whatever else you've got done. Now, if you're unsure where to run a fence, make it all. Here's my rule of thumb: make it all temporary. If you're unsure, make it temporary, and whatever you don't move in 3 years, you can make it permanent. I know so many places that they start, oh, we're going to build this pretty little homestead, and they start building fences, and they're all in the wrong place. They don't work. The animals don't flow. But because it took so much emotional and economic energy to build the fence, well, you're not going to so you spend the rest of your life, dealing with these animals that are balling up in this awkward corner because you built the fence too soon. So make it all temporary, and then whatever you don't move and works in 3 years, then you can make that permanent. Make sure you get it done before you buy anything. Man, the worst thing in the world is to get those animals in and not be able to keep them home. Follow terrain to get your similar aspect in each field, and make that work. Justin talked about the 2 ways to keep your animals sanitary: rest in sunshine or vibrant decomposition. I'm not going to work on that. All right. The next thing then is as we're going toward abundance, so we've got to design we've got to think about what we're going to grow and what we're going to produce. Then we've got to design our landscape so it can handle that. And the next part then is stacking. That's another permaculture idea. And that's essentially, instead of using linear space, we're going to use vertical space. So think about what low growers that you can grow under high growers. One of the most coolest places ever was a place in Arizona. It was a little 12-acre farm. This family was making their full-time living on their 12-acre farm, and they had vineyard, but instead of having the grapevines like a normal vineyard, they had them spaced way far apart so they could run chicken shelters down through between the rows, and so they had a kind of rotation they had vineyard, and then they would run 3 years of chicken shelters, and then they would do a year of vegetables, and then a year of garlic, okay? And then go back to grass and 3 years of chickens in the grass. And above the grapes, if you look at grapes in nature, where do they trellis in nature? Up a tree. Grapes love mottled shade, kind of variable shade. And so these folks had put in apple trees in the vineyard rows, and then about every 150 feet, they had a higher growing open canopied nut tree. Like this was Arizona. They had pecans, English walnuts that are kind of open canopy trees, not hickory nuts. Hickory's too opaque a canopy, but a gentle canopy that would allow this. So imagine this. They had either garlic, vegetables, or chickens down here at ground level. Then they had grapes. Then they had apples and peaches and pears. And then they had nut trees up. That stacking. And these guys were making, great money off of a very, very small place. So think about low growers under high growers. Think about chickens under rabbits. Chickens over pigs. Make sure chickens, we make tables so we can have like a mezzanine in there, a completely portable mezzanine. You just truck it in. Fortunately, pigs can't climb very high. So even a 4-foot, tabletop mezzanine with all the chicken stuff on it, you can still run pigs underneath, chickens up on top. So you can take your like winter quarters and you can turn it into double the square footage by putting a portable mezzanine in it. Animals in orchard, hanging herb gardens on the porch, barrels and culverts with pockets. One of the most interesting things I ever saw was a guy in, I think it was in Nigeria, and he'd found a bunch of 30-inch culverts used and cut them in 12-foot pieces, put them on edge, took an acetylene torch, cut pockets in it, and he was growing the equivalent, I think it was 25 acres of broccoli. He stuffed them full of compost, dribbled water in the top, and broccoli was growing off of these culverts. He was growing 25 acres worth of broccoli in about an acre and a half of 12-foot tall culverts packed with compost. It was wonderful, wonderful. So those kind of things are all really, really abundant, productive. Think about your microclimates. Your microclimates. If you have a pond, for example, doesn't have to be a big pond. Water creates, ambience. It's a mass. It holds holds temperature. So the leeward side of a pond, our winds come from the westerlies here, and so they're coming across the pond. You ever notice how on a cool fall morning or a cool real early spring morning, and the fog coming up off a pond, right? All right. Well, that's indicating the heat. The heat that the pond is holding and the cool ambient air, so you can take the windward side where this air comes across the pond, and you've got about a 20-foot zone there that you could plant things like, blackberries or strawberries or peach trees, something that's that's frost prone, and you can get a frost-free pocket to use the energy mass as the water comes across the pond. Masonry walls, again, masonry is a heat sink. So, for example, we grow fig trees. Again, we've got a terrace, a southern sloping terrace. So you don't use a northern slope, use a southern slope. So it's already warmer. Then you build a masonry wall to hold a terrace, and you can plant fig trees against there. And what these little microclimates do is they create little. You can cheat your zone. Okay, we're all in horticulture zones, and you can cheat your zone lots of times by one or two zones simply by using a microclimate around your place. Think about reflective sides. We've used, for example, if you've got a barn side that's got reflective siding, metal siding, and the sun, think about it, it's facing south, the sun is hitting it, and it's bouncing down to the ground. Chances are, out from that wall 5 feet, you've got a frost-free zone that can give you an extra month or two of growing season or starting. And then if you put your cold frame in that same spot, you've actually accentuated the cold frame. So reflective sides are good. Roof runoff. If you've got an eave where you've got water runoff and you've got condensation, you've got a metal roof, condenses in the summer. You notice how lots of times in the summer you go out on a hot July day and off your barn roof you see drip, 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 water's dripping off the roof. Well, that's the cool metal roof condensing the dew from the morning, and it runs off the roof. Well, put garden beds right under that roof, and then you can add hugelkulture. You can make hugelkulture beds under your barn roof. Now the animals don't grow up and make mud holes around the barn, and you get advantage of all that extra runoff. And the runoff doesn't create an erosion problem around the garden, around the barn, because it goes into your hugelkulture bed, which then grows magnificent plants which can trellis up the side of the barn. Okay, are you with me? Okay, so you're identifying these wonderful little micro spots that you can get more production. One of the neatest things we've done is a floating garden. I saw this. I don't have any original ideas. I just steal ideas. Okay, and so this was, I think, in Farm Show magazine. Farm Show. Everybody get Farm Show, the newspaper Farm Show? Oh, you got to get that. It's great. So this guy. So you go down to Lowe's and you get a 6-inch PVC pipe. You make a raft out of 6-inch PVC pipe. Now the caps are going to be a 1/4-inch thick, authority material. So the distance between each pipe is going to be about a 1/2 inch. You put a board around the side. You put soil and compost in there on top of the raft. You plant in there. You put it in the middle of your pond. Now your pond, again, doesn't have to be real big. It can be a pretty small pond, 20 feet across if you want. But you can put this floating raft in there, plant in it, and the pond becomes like a moat. So especially things like broccoli and cabbage and things that are buggy prone, you won't have any bugs in there because the bugs have to cross a moat, and frogs and salamanders and amphibians and stuff that live in the pond, fish. You got bluegills in there. Bluegills will live in, goodness, you can grow bluegills in a bathtub. All right, they don't need much. All right, and And so, they'll eat as bugs try to come, they try to eat them. And of course, the beautiful thing is that the pond, because of the heat mass, it makes perfect ambient temperature, so there's no ambient temperature fluctuations, which is what plants love. Plants love they love no temperature fluctuations. So you can use your mass there, your water, to help all that. So using your microclimates. All right, how about leaders and followers, okay? So, think about leaders and followers. For example, in your garden, you start with frost-resistant stuff early, and then as it starts, as your head lettuce starts to bolt and cabbage and broccoli starts to go down, before it actually goes down, you come in with your tomato sets. You come in with other things, peppers, tomatoes, green beans, and you plant in there so that by the time that early spring crop is done, you've already got your summer, your heat-loving plants already are up 7-8 inches tall, and you create these seasons. And then as you come into fall, you can go back into your cool season stuff. Some fall peas, some beets, carrots, things like that can take frost. And even here, you can get 3 crops, 3 different cycles out of one place simply. And then if you add some remake cover or a little bit of plastic row covers to it and extend the season more, then you can actually get build in additional time in that. So leader follower works real well. Obviously, we're in livestock. Chickens following cows or chickens following sheep. The bird herbivore leader follower works really well, including calves and cows. Lambs and ewes. Make a little creep in your electric fence so that the young stock can go out farther and they can cream stuff and maybe go out and eat some things along the edge of your access lane, help to keep that mowed. Don't worry, they'll come back to mama. All right, but they'll be able to go out and get some cream that they wouldn't be able to get otherwise confined with their parent stock. And then another stacking idea is of course using animals to do your work. And of course we use pigs for composting, chickens and ducks for bug control, that sort of thing. If you've got a very small acreage, I really recommend. I don't recommend free range chickens for anything under about 50 acres because the chickens always find home, and home is going to be the lawnmower handle, the swing on the gazebo, and then mama goes out to sit on the swing, and she's got chickens all leave calling cards wherever they go. And now she gets up and she's got a bunch of chicken do, or the kids track it all in the house, and we all know then when mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So think about heating greenhouses with compost and animals, so you can heat greenhouses this way. Obviously, chickens for composting and kitchen scraps and things like that. A moment on fertility. On how are we going to keep our fertility up? We'll minimize tillage. I'm a big believer in raised beds. So you've got a lawn, you want to turn it into a garden. You don't need to till it up. Just go out there, put in your, make your beds, make some sort of frame, put a bunch of cardboard. Everybody's got junk cardboard. You can find cardboard. Put cardboard on the bottom. That'll keep the grass down. Put your put your slab wood and firewood and stuff on the bottom. Put a foot of compost and soil on top. Boom, you've got your bed. No tillage, no anything. You don't even have to use a broad fork. And I've got all that stuff. But I've become lazier and lazier the older I've gotten, and just work with it. Maximize carbon. So one of the first things you want to do is to find sources of carbon in your area. I talked about this yesterday in the composting workshop. Stockpile carbon, inventory carbon, find carbon, whether it's from the neighbors, extra leaves that they would burn otherwise, bring them home. Give a dozen eggs to your local tree crew, your utility pruner crews, that sort of thing. Scavenge anything brown. Anything that's brown, scavenge it. And finally, Finally, abundance and really growing abundance in your little homestead. Use your whole family labor. Make everything child friendly. I love garden beds, especially that are higher because they're so child friendly. The kids aren't going to go in and walk through the seeds you just planted and all that. You want to minimize your child fuss time. Okay, and you want to maximize the time that they can be really helpful. So beds clearly designate what's garden and what's not garden. The other thing about garden beds is that they make it sectional. So you can go out and you can say, okay, I'm going to work in bed A today, and it's actually small enough that you can actually work in it and accomplish something in a small time accomplishment. This incrementalism is really important. And then finally, another great benefit of the whole family labor is just the emotional and spiritual abundance. We've talked about growing food. We've talked about increasing the commons. I mean, there's a lot of abundance that comes on. Probably the greatest abundance that can come from what I've already talked about is the emotional and spiritual abundance in the family itself, because the kids grow up learning work produces compensation. Tomatoes just don't happen to show up on the shelf. Milk doesn't just happen to show up in a jar. You have to work, and that relationship between work and compensation is a big deal. What we have comes from labor. There's no entitlement here. And the truth is, another important thing is to know that things die. Some tomato plants don't make it. Some carrots don't make it. Some lambs don't make it. And it's important to encounter death in that intimate relationship early on. To know that life is bigger than me. I'm not on a marionette controlling everything with strings. And just the life lessons and character development add to the abundance. Our movement right now is we're in a homestead tsunami. And I'm trying to prep you for my new book coming out, see. Once a marketer, always a marketer. But this movement is being driven a lot by fear of scarcity. We're concerned about scarcity. When we don't have the dollar anymore. If the Fed continues to be stupid, and don't want to start down that rabbit hole, but. But right, if the store shelves, and if Putin continues, and if all these things, defund the police and the cities burn and all that, what has driven our movement so far is fear, and a lot of people, fear makes you do things. It makes you do things you wouldn't otherwise do. But fear won't sustain a movement. What's going to sustain us is. Yes, it's okay to run away. That's fine. The fire's burning, run away. But eventually, you stop running, and you have to run to something else. And so what we're actually doing is running to, the long-term sustainability is going to be running to, by faith, a new way of living, an abundant way of living, an independent way of living, and that's what this movement is about. So we're running from fear to faith, and we're embracing that. So I congratulate all of us that are here. I congratulate the team that's put on the summit here. I congratulate the threads and the ideas that are being shared here, so that we can all, it's okay to be fearful, but so that we can all gradually make that transition from fearing what we don't like out here, disentangling from the system, and actually embracing a brand new lifestyle way of living that is absolutely abundant for our families and our future and our world. Now, may all of your carrots grow long and straight. May your radishes be large but not pithy. May tomato blossom end rot affect your Monsanto neighbor's tomatoes. May the coyotes be struck blind at your pastured chickens. May all of your culinary experiments be delectably palatable. May all of your jar lids pop. May the rain fall gently on your fields, the wind be always at your back. Your children rise and call you blessed, and may we all make our nest a better place than we inherited. God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joel.